This is Consumer Friend.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Consumer Friend podcast. Consumerfriend.org.uk is there for all your needs when you're buying goods, services and digital content, explaining to you your rights in plain English. Today's episode, we are going to talk about consumer vulnerability, Louise's favourite subject. So I had to say yes to Louise when she wanted to do a consumer vulnerability podcast because I got my wish last time when we did media literacy. So, hi Lou, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Ads. And also, what we'll do today is we'll make sure we include media literacy, so then everyone will be happy.
Okay, I mean, the media literacy one is... So it was the most amazing podcast we've ever done, I think.
I think it was quite good. I liked it. I like the snippets you've created for socials as well, which is really good, which obviously that is playing into media literacy because they get a tiny little snip and then we hopefully attract loads more listeners. It's almost a bit ironic, really, isn't it?
That we're creating media to try and attract listeners.
We're showing all the best bits, so we're making out that the whole podcast is that funny and that amazing.
I'm not sure we're showing all the best bits. I think we've got a few gems in there, so make sure you go back and listen, please.
It's a good podcast. I'm learning a lot about it. I've read up a lot around it since we did it. It's really interesting.
Oh, I've read so much. I have read so much. I'm ready. I'm not ready yet, but I reckon I'm a year away from exploding onto the UK market with media literacy for everyone. I want to get it in schools. I want to get it in colleges. I want to get it in businesses. I want to get it everywhere. I want everyone to understand the reasons why they see what they see.
We can do that. I'll add it to the list.
Can you add it to the list?
Add it.
There is a current list that Louise keeps on adding to, and I say to Louise, we haven't completed the previous jobs.
Well, I've created. No, generally what happens is I'm like, you're like, we've got this to do, this to do, this to do. And I'll go, they're all your jobs. So yeah, you've got lots to do. I've done all my jobs.
So in this partnership, Louise is the thinker. So Louise will come up with all these elaborate, wonderful things to do. And what I do is I follow up behind her, sweeping them all up and trying to make them actually happen.
That's generally what happens. And some of them are really good ideas, but it's never going to happen. So Adam pretends he's listened, and then hopefully then within a couple of days I'll forget that I've said it, so it's fine. But the good ones keep coming back, Ads. The good ones keep coming back.
They do keep coming back, and they're almost certainly on the Consumer Friend website. So please go to consumerfriend.org.uk to have a look at our website. It's getting better by the fortnight. Let's go with fortnight, yeah. These podcasts are around every fortnight, hopefully. Okay, so, right, consumer vulnerability. Louise, talk to me about consumer vulnerability. Why are we doing consumer vulnerability podcast today?
Right, so there's been a couple of reports that I've read recently. One is the NICE report that's come out that talks about different groups of hidden vulnerability. So as you've listened to any of our podcasts before or heard either one of us speaking about this, historically, vulnerability or people were labelled as vulnerable, which is a bit of a stigma. There's a bit of a stigma attached to that. It can be perceived as a bit of a dirty word or a weakness. So we always sort of bang on about, or me particularly, about the fact we don't like to call people vulnerable. That is their situation on marketplaces that cause those vulnerabilities. So, for example, if you are recently bereaved and you have to move house because of that. So your situation is the fact that you're recently bereaved and the marketplace is buying a new home. All of those things could make you vulnerable and mean that you potentially don't make the best decisions for yourself at that particular time. We don't get the best outcomes. But there are lots of things that can cause situation or marketplace vulnerability. And it's very complicated. Yes. We do some amazing training that makes it far simpler than that. There's a couple of questions I've got today around this stuff is, what does vulnerability really look like? And secondly is, what are consumers vulnerable to? They're my two big questions I want answered today.
So, but you're going to be answering these questions though, Louise. So are you asking me to write those down to then come back to you a bit later on to then ask you those questions and then you can answer them?
I think it's really...
Are you asking and answering the questions? Yes, you are. Oh, I've just done it.
I think what I'd like is for people to email us and tell us their thoughts on it, and then we'll revisit it. Because again, I'm not sure on all of the answers to this stuff. I'm learning so much all of the time.
And people can email us on info@consumerfriend.org.uk.
Yes. We're developing we've got a training package on this. We train businesses. We've trained 10,000 people, actually, Adam.
Consumer Friend has trained now
10,000.
10,000 people on consumer vulnerability.
That's amazing. That is really good. But from that, we revisit the training all the time. We're learning all of the time as this stuff evolves and government policies evolving on it. I mean, I'm very boring right now, but it evolves all of the time. And the further away we get from the pandemic, the more we see the vulnerabilities that the pandemic has actually caused. And that's all starting to unfold as we speak.
So March 2024, NICE had this report published.
Yeah, and they surveyed 2,000 people, didn't they?
They did. Okay, so Lou, what does vulnerability really look like?
All right, so according to the latest reports, and obviously the stuff that we've used before, the Financial Conduct Authority talk about 47% of the adult population in the UK showing one or more characteristic of vulnerability. And now they're talking about the fact that 60% of people are also struggling to keep up with bills. And against the backdrop of all the economic uncertainty, that figure's going up. So vulnerability, we don't actually know what we're looking at, but we're looking at more than half the population are potentially living with experiencing consumer vulnerability.
47% of people are living with some form of vulnerability. And we're going to talk about what that vulnerability looks like over the next 15 minutes.
A characteristic of vulnerability. So it doesn't mean they're actually vulnerable. So they could be, depending, subjective, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And they found that there were 4 key drivers of vulnerability. The first one being health issues, including mental and physical illness.
Yeah.
So what's that? Things like, common mental disorders, physical issues, disabilities, those kind of things.
Anxiety, depression, stress, all of those things come into under those. And actually, we're still seeing an increase in people needing and wanting support for mental health conditions as well. So, and that mental health support, I think we've all got a bit, stress is certainly increased. And again, that can lead to mental health problems or potential addiction. So it leads on. And again, those things can cause vulnerability. So we're in a bit of a storm of it at the moment, Ads, to be honest. I
agree. So what it means is that someone that's in this situation, so someone that might be having these mental health issues or someone that might have that physical disability at that time, might not be making the best choices for them when they're buying stuff online, when they're looking out in the marketplace looking for deals and bargains. Would that be fair to say?
Also, if you strip it back a little bit, they might not even be aware of it. They might not be aware of their vulnerability. They might not be aware of the fact that they are struggling. So again, it depends on what they're trying to do at that particular time as well. So again, if you're back to our media literacy stuff, if you're in a situation where you've got heightened anxiety or you've got heightened stress, you might not be able to interpret what is legitimate and what's not. So where we talk about consumers not potentially getting the best deal for themselves at the time, it could be as severe as becoming a victim of a crime as well, being misled, becoming a victim of a scam or fraud, or buying something that they actually don't need at all.
Yep. Okay, fair enough. Okay, so the second one is live events, including bereavement and job loss. Things that are going on in people's life or around people's lives that could cause them to be situationally vulnerable.
Live events, including bereavement and job loss. Okay, so these are other things as well, aren't they? Job loss, relationship breakdowns, onset of ill health, sick child, any of those things. These can cause situational vulnerability. It's fluctuating. So again, depending on, and it's really subjective. So you could be really affected by a bereavement and I might not be affected by that bereavement. So it depends again on that particular person. So we can't make assumptions about it, but it is a bit of a red flag that somebody might be situationally vulnerable and therefore may need additional support. And that could just be extra time to make decisions. So it could be something as simple as that.
So we say in our training, we've got in our training that there's 5 big life events that could be considered or are considered to be the most stressful life events in an average person's life. I mean, we hate to use the phrase average person's life, but I can't think of anything better. And they are bereavement, job loss, moving house, relocation.
No.
And major illness or injury.
Is it relocation? Isn't that moving house?
Yeah. No, that moving areas. Well, let's leave it at that. You have to take the full training to find out what the 5 are. But I think I've nailed that. I think I've got that. So yeah, all those situations mean that people are suffering from increased anxiety, increased stress, which could mean that their decision making becomes impaired, and it might mean that they might not be making the best choices for them. Right. The next one around the key drivers of vulnerability was low resilience and inability to withstand financial or emotional shock. Talk to me, Lou.
This is about financial capability. And again, average reading age of a UK consumer being 12. This is also people being in debt and that weren't in debt and their inability to be able to manage that effectively. So that can cause situational vulnerability.
Yeah, so it could be like, I always say it's people that have spent the last 20 years being quite financially resilient, quite financially stable. And we've had, obviously, I'm going to say it, cost of living crisis, where inflation rates have increased, mortgage rates have increased. People have got less disposable cash, and they're maybe making more risks and taking more risks, and they're too proud to kind of try and seek support. That'd be fair to say.
I don't think it's too proud or about support. People don't always know where to go. People don't understand the situation. It's not even pride, it's shame, isn't it, as well? It's there's a whole range of things that can go with it.
Or pride and shame.
And they think that they can manage their way out of situations as well. We've all been there where we've bought something we shouldn't, thought, well, I've got to get myself back out of that. But because a lot of it's beyond people's control because of the cost of living crisis, they're not able to bring it back in.
Yeah.
We're not taught how to budget at school either. We're not taught that.
We really weren't. There's so many things we weren't taught at school. But, we can do y equals mx plus c equals b2, whatever it may be.
I'm not sure I can remember that far back, but yeah.
No. I can work out the angle of a isosceles triangle.
It's like Pythagoras' theorem, isn't it, when you have to do that? I was doing like dividing fractions, but I had to Google it and watch a YouTube video on how to do it. I was like...
But I haven't got a bloody clue about mortgage rates.
No one's told me how to write a spreadsheet on how to budget. No, exactly. So, no.
Okay, so the last one of the 4 key drivers is low capability and confidence in managing money or dealing with financial matters. I guess we've literally just covered that. Kind of goes hand in hand with that low resilience of financial matters. So, yeah, I think that's kind of there as well. Okay, so if we move on to the challenging assumptions about vulnerability, do you want to move on to that, or should we just go straight onto the demographics?
Just around that, again, things that we say, just because you're old doesn't mean that you're vulnerable. It's not, doesn't mean that. We always talk about this, that and Adam always uses older old and younger young. There are certain vulnerabilities that come with cognitive aging that people that are younger or younger young may not have, but just because you're older doesn't mean that you're vulnerable or affected by consumer vulnerability. Again, it's subjective. People don't self-identify generally. About 17% of people that are situationally vulnerable or marketplace vulnerable do not self-identify as such. So it's 2 out of 10 of us will be the ones that self-identify. The rest of us don't, because that's either because we don't know about it or we don't want to, because there's shame around it. Again, it's seen as a weakness, which it's not. Mental health is, again, crucial and something that really affects us from a vulnerability perspective, but we're still not talking about it enough, and people aren't happy to put their hands up and say, look, I'm struggling here, and actually then get support that they need there. And it's complicated. So again, it changes. It's fluctuating. It's dynamic. We move in and out of periods of it. So it's not, once you're vulnerable, you don't stay vulnerable. It's not static. It's a state. No, it's a state, not a trait, or trait, not a state. Which way? It's a trait.
This is literally our training.
Not a state. Yeah.
No, it's a state.
It's a state, not a trait. For God's sake, so confused. It's a state, not a trait. Yeah, good job you are here.
Okay, perfect. And when it comes to disclosing these vulnerabilities to businesses or to people that could really help them, guide them through whatever marketplace it may be, this report has kind of found that a lot of consumers are very uncomfortable with talking about some of those vulnerabilities. And the biggest vulnerability they're uncomfortable with talking about is around that mental health. Mm-hmm. So 38% of people surveyed actually were uncomfortable disclosing any problems around mental health to a business that they're engaging with.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. We don't like to talk about things like that, do we? This is the problem. And we don't like to ask for help. And vulnerability is seen as, like I say, it's a weakness, there's a stigma behind it. There's also a lot of vulnerability bias where people will judge you because you say, if you are self-identified as vulnerable, I don't feel mentally very well at the minute, I feel like I'm situationally vulnerable, there's going to be lots of people that treat you differently because of that, or treat that like that's a weakness, not then play to your strengths. So we have to overcome that. So that's why we do that training and try to educate people that it's different and it's not something that we should be judging, and there shouldn't be any shame placed around it either.
Absolutely. So businesses should be proactively identifying these vulnerabilities and creating as bespoke a service as they possibly can. Now, obviously, there are resource issues with that, and you cannot provide a bespoke service to every single customer. But what you can do is you can provide inclusive services. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. Inclusive services. So if you provide and design an inclusive service, you won't need to identify all the vulnerabilities either, because you'll scoop everybody up.
So, 38% were uncomfortable talking about poor mental health. You've got 30% who were uncomfortable talking about relationship breakdown, 21% on financial pressures and worries, 21% again, poor physical health, 18% lack of financial knowledge skills, 17% bereavement, and 13% job loss. So all the drivers, there's still some people out there that I would be uncomfortable talking about it. So if we were to then go and look at the demographics of these people that are experiencing these vulnerabilities, there were 5 key demographics that were highlighted in the NICE report, and they were unexpected carers, ground down Gen Z. We'll get into that in a bit. That's quite a good fun one, isn't it? Ground down Gen Z. Striving renters, hard up homemakers, and solo sufferers, but I keep calling them silver surfers, and it's completely the other end of the spectrum.
But these aren't the 5 groups of vulnerability, just to be clear. These are 5 groups that they've identified as hidden that we weren't aware of before. So these are new groups that are potentially vulnerable and may become vulnerable in the future. So these are new groups of people. So where historically we might have gone, well, older people, we can understand why there might be some vulnerability there. Not all old people are vulnerable, or people with long-term disabilities, people living with cancer, people that are bereaved, people moving house, all of those things. We knew about those. These are new groups.
Unexpected carers. Who's an unexpected carer? How would we describe them?
Anyone who's a main carer for a close family member is what that's been categorised within the report. So any new carer may be vulnerable, but only 39% self-identify as vulnerable in the survey. So again, it's a hidden. So again, if people have caring responsibilities, it's worth spending the time just to find out if they need any additional support. Yeah, because people will be suffering in silence as well. This will all be tied up into, and again, I'm not going to get into psychology of all of it, but again, declaring your vulnerability when you're looking after somebody who is potentially vulnerable because of their situation as well, that must be really difficult. And there's money situations with that, and there's loneliness, and there's isolation issues, and there's all those other things, mental health, physical health, all those things that come with it as well. So if somebody did disclose that they have caring responsibilities, it's worth providing that extra support to them, or asking them what they need. Do they need anything else?
I can't imagine what it would be like if all of a sudden if my wife became ill and I had to be her carer. Not only am I having the pressure of looking after my wife, but I've also lost some income as well because she would not be working. So there'd be a huge amount of extra pressure being loaded on me just for that problem. I say just that.
Yeah, so not just the financial, but also your loss of autonomy, the fact that you can't just whiz out and go to the gym, all of those things, the knock-ons from it. It could be depending on your circumstances.
The next one is ground down Gen Z. Now there's a phrase for 2024, isn't there? Ground down Gen Z.
Should we make that simpler, which is people aged between 18 and 24, basically? Historically.
No. Everyone needs to understand exactly what Gen Zs are.
Well, 18 to 24, the majority is single, non-parents, and they're renters. Right, so again, there are issues with this Gen Zs and the 18 to 24-year-old group of poor mental health and financial risk. We're also aware that younger people were one of the greatest groups affected by the pandemic as well. So again, this is all tied up with that. And again, there's that, did they miss out on things within the education system? Are they taught life skills? Are they situationally vulnerable when they're buying things online, particularly media literacy? We were fortunate enough, Ads, to grow up in the world where we didn't have phones until we were about 20. We didn't have the internet unless you had dial-up until like later on. Yeah. So we were bombarded by this. We were bombarded by stuff, literacy, like posters and magazines and stuff like that, but not like kids are now. And there's a definite link, which you will love, between social media and mental health, isn't there?
Oh, 100%. But that's so obvious as well. Anyone who looks at any kind of statistics will know that. That's just it. That's just obvious. Have a look at it for yourself. Don't need me to preach you about that. Yep. So what I found quite interesting here was 2 in 10 Gen Z surveyed self-identified as vulnerable, and as many, but according to the Financial Conduct Authority's classification system, as many as 8 in 10 of them could actually be considered vulnerable. So again, there's no self-identification. Also, over a third, 37% of Gen Zs identified as having poor mental health. For recent graduates who are renting and have amassed student loan debt, that increases to 51%.
And they say they're more comfortable, again, generalising, more comfortable discussing mental health. Almost a third wouldn't talk to someone in customer service, talk to a customer service advisor about that. You also got to think about things like buy now, pay later schemes. Like, I wouldn't use that. I don't like that. It makes me feel like I'd be in debt, and then I'd be like, "Oh God, I can't do that." That makes me feel that makes me feel stressed. But the Gen Z, that short-term finance, Klarna, used to be. What was the one that you could buy, like get money on a Friday when you needed it to go out?
Oh, with the payday loans.
Yes.
Yeah, they
had a great advert, didn't they? Which I can't
started
remember.
sponsoring football clubs,
Yes.
and then they all got in trouble for sponsoring football clubs, and the football clubs were told that they weren't being responsible. What were they called? I'll Google it. Someone Google it. What was it called? It's really annoying me.
Wonga.
Well done, you. Well done. Nailed it.
Because we used to take the mickey out of my mum if she lent us money and then charge us an interest rate. We'd be like, all right, Wonga. But again, it's like legitimate loan sharks, isn't it? Again, it is. Again, some of it's interest-free now, but again, it's societally, it's more acceptable. But again, you get yourself into more debt because of these things, which then makes that potential vulnerability greater.
Next demographic, striving renters. This is working people under perpetual pressure.
So renters who are either full-time, part-time or self-employed, typically aged between 25 and 44. It's the 50% category. Parents, non-parents, it's an equal split, so there's that additional pressure there. 24% of working renters have missed payments in the last 12 months.
That's a quarter.
Yeah.
A quarter of these people have missed their... That sends shivers down my spine. It's even the thought of missing a mortgage payment or a rent payment that would just scare the hell out of them.
They're living month to month, and they've also got low financial resilience as well. So 38% say they would struggle to meet an increased rent payment of just £50 a month. And 2 in 5 describe themselves as heavily burdened by financial commitments. All of that adds to increasing mental health and increasing situational vulnerability.
Okay, next one is hard up homemakers coping with rising costs.
This is us. So mortgage holders, typically aged between 35 and 54. Parents.
This is me.
This is you. Parents.
This is me.
Married or in partnership. So this is us. 71% of hard up homemakers are potentially vulnerable under the Financial Conduct Authority criteria. Because it's a bit more complicated. It's interest rates and living costs. So almost a quarter of us say they would struggle to meet an increased mortgage payment of just £50 a month. Owning an asset doesn't always go hand in hand with cash flow. I think, again, it's like a hidden group of vulnerability, isn't it? Like, we know our mortgages are up this year at some point, our fixed rates, and I'm certainly worried about mine and what that's going to mean for me. So it can cause a huge amount of situational vulnerability as well.
Absolutely. People could probably look at us and go, oh, you're okay. You've got a mortgage. You're a homeowner. It's okay. You've got X amount of money in equity. But actually, the mortgage rates have gone up so much now that our mortgage payments are now almost crippling us on a monthly basis. Well, mine is up in September, and I am panicking so much about that fit. I say it's up in September. The fixed rate term that was there for 5 years. It's finishing in September, and I'm really panicking about it. And I'm considering all the options, considering things like moving home or maybe potentially going onto an interest-only mortgage rate, in the hope that the interest rates will come down, and then in a year I can then fix again for another 5 years. But there are so many different options, and I don't know what the future holds, and no one can predict the future. So making those decisions is really hard, and it's really stressful, and it can really cause a lot of anxiety.
Also, can we even go on to interest rate only mortgages now? Can you do that? I don't even know I haven't even. Do you know what? Mine's up in June, and I'm literally going la 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 la.
Absolutely.
Oh God! It's like the Bank of England sends out an announcement. I'm like, I know, don't open that email.
Yeah, don't listen to it. I said last year, it's okay. Ours is up in September. We'll start looking at the interest rates in January, February, and start making a decision, start contacting, we'll get in touch with our financial person, what they're called, our mortgage broker, and we'll see what done. We're here in the beginning of April. I have not spoken to anyone yet because we hear that the mortgage rates are going to come down. So I think, right, let's hold on, wait for the mortgage rates to come down, and then talk to my mortgage broker.
Yep. I'm with you. I don't want to know about it. I do want to know about it. No, I don't want to know.
Ostrich.
Yeah, but
head in sand.
It's not the right way to deal with it, but I understand that how that causes vulnerability.
It's a way to deal with it.
True story. A way. Brilliant.
Ignoring it is a way of dealing with it. Obviously, I wouldn't condone ignoring it.
No,
try and hit it head on.
Get some advice.
I will try this month. I promise.
Get some advice from someone that's not me or Adam, who are literally hiding from the mortgage interest rates. Oh, God.
And the last one, then the last demographic that's been identified is solo sufferers, navigating sudden financial changes in a world designed for two.
Anyone who is single, separated, divorced, or widowed. And this is a diverse
This is you as well,
This is me as
Louise.
well.
Of course, it was a typically Louise fits into two.
I've got to fit
She wants.
into two.
I want all the demographics.
Well, yeah, but getting divorced does give you a financial. Well, it did certainly give me a financial walloping, because that's what happens.
Yeah,
you build a life together, and then you have to split that life financially, and then you have to try and rebuild it, and it does cause a lot of anxiety. And then you are solo, and all the pressure is on you, and that can cause some isolation and some self-imposed pressure. And I think that's an issue as well, that self-imposed pressure. So, yeah, 12% of solo sufferers say they are experiencing increased financial pressure due to a recent relationship breakdown. These often sudden events dramatically reduce household income whilst expenses remain high. I think also, like, not to go too deeply into it, but you really don't want your children to be affected. So you're like, yeah, have what you want, which doesn't help. The guilt purchases do not help the financial situation. So, yeah.
Ski holiday with school,
Yeah.
of course. Where the hell am I going to find that money?
Of course you can start another hobby. Of course you can. Extracurricular, so positive for your mental health. Like, no, so yeah, it's just what it is, isn't it? Like, and again, it's really subjective depending on your financial position, your ability to go out and earn additional money, your physical, mental, academic, all of those things. So again, it's subjective, but these are one of the groups that are really struggling.
Okay, so Louise, 5 key demographics identified, 4 key drivers of vulnerability identified thanks to this report. It's nice that everyone is starting to kind of recognize consumer vulnerability as a real thing and understand that businesses need to be able to identify and support their customers, their clients, the consumers that use their products and their services. They can support them through their consumer vulnerability and help them get the best deal for them. So what else can be done from businesses to support consumer vulnerability?
The first thing is start the conversation, isn't it? Once you start having an awareness of it, then you can start to have those conversations internally. Obviously, I'm going to say have our training because it's amazing. Have our training, but again, do some research on it. It's train your staff, make them aware of it, and then it's about reviewing continuously your processes. Your complaint data and your feedback from consumers is the greatest wealth of information.
Oh, it's so important, isn't it? It's so important. I get so annoyed by the constant feedback surveys whenever I buy anything. You know, I bought a dog collar for little Milo for £4.99 from Amazon. And it works. It's fine. But 2 days later, email, rate your dog collar. I'm like, no, I don't want to. Yeah. Why make me?
It's the whole thing is like we want people as well to, from a business perspective, there's still a bit of fear around complaints, but actually complaints are good because that means you can change things. Yeah. Don't make assumptions about people. There's lots of things that you can do. Set up a consumer panel where you can ask consumers actually what they think. Well, have you got it right? But you start from the beginning, like we said. If you build your business, so whether you're an organisation like a local authority, whether you're a private sector business, whether you're a not-for-profit, wherever you are, your charity, is if you start with consumers and vulnerability at the heart of it, and you design your services so that they're inclusive, you will scoop up everybody. You won't have to identify all those individual vulnerabilities. So from your marketing, from your website, from your communication strategies, from your complaints departments, from all of it, from your aftercare, all of it should be designed with consumer vulnerability in mind. And then you shouldn't miss anyone.
Absolutely. More information is available at the Consumer Friend website. There is a consumer vulnerability web page on the website that looks into the different training that we provide, but also some general information around consumer vulnerability with some resources on there. Please visit. And if you want to know more, please get in touch with us at info@consumerfriend.org.uk. We can help you start that conversation.
Also, there's going to be some really exciting consumer vulnerability news coming from Consumer Friend soon. Just got to write it down.
Oh, for God's sake. More stuff.
If I write it down, Adam has to do it. Those are the rules.
I don't think that. I think you've just made those rules up.
Yeah, but that's how rules get made up, Adam.
Oh, okay.
Someone says them.
Get made by just saying them.
Well, someone says them and then someone does it and then it's a rule.
Okay, let's finish it up there, I think. Louise, lovely to speak to you as ever.
This was fun. Thanks, Ads.
Thank you very much. Right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is Consumer Friend.